In the previous part, we have started with the search of Rajputs. So we have seen that their location was primarily in the northwest of India, and they have the proud traditions they inherited from their earlier or their ancestors. And they've also resisted the Arab invasions of Sindh and few centuries earlier, and the Rajputs were always battling against invasions, and there were two groups formed, that is the Mewar and the Marwar. And we've already seen in the previously about Ranakumbha, who was ruling the Mewar kingdom, which was in Rajasthan, and he was successful in stopping the invasions. And then we have studied about Ranasanga, who in the early 16th century has unified all the Rajput clans to battle against Babur, the first Mughal ruler, in the Battle of Khanwa. It is important to remember that it was the Battle of Khanwa where Ranasanga has united all the Rajput clans. And next we've studied about Maharana Pratap, who, even though he was wounded in one of the wars, he escaped from that place and learned a special warfare that is known as guerrilla warfare, where people would actually know the terrain where they are fighting, and with this they can make secret attacks on their enemies. So in this way he had learned this skill, and he was supported by bills. Therefore the Mewar emblem also has a bill warrior on the left and the king on the right. So this emblem shows us how much importance the bills had in his rule. And then we have started studying about the Ahoms, who were an ethnic group in the 13th century, and they have migrated from the present day Myanmar to the Brahmaputra valley and formed the Ahom. They have become the Ahoms. So they have followed the pike system to stop or resist the invasion. So pike system is where the general public will be called on to fight in exchange for land rights. So whenever there is war or high time or the need for an army, then the common people, the abled men, would be called for the war, and after it they'll be handing over for the exchange of land rights. So in this way, even though the Ahoms did not have a permanent army, but the temporary army was enough for them to resist the invasions. So in this way they are able to protect their traditions, and because of them the northwest have such great traditions till date. And next we've studied about the rise of Sikhs. So basically in the 15th century we can see that Guru Nanak has spread the message of compassion and oneness of God, and his followers are called to be the Sikhs. So Guru Nanak's followers are called to be Sikhs, and initially it was just a spiritual movement, but later on, due to the ongoing invasions, they had to turn it out to be a rebellious movement as well. So one such example is Guru Arjan, who has supported his rebellious son, and this went or caught the eye of Emperor Jahangir, who had Guru Arjan beheaded. So due to this, Guru Har Gobind, who was the son of Guru Arjan, had to start military or martial trainings, and he had fought against the Mughal forces. And then we have seen that in the year 1675, the Kashmiri Pandits have approached Guru Teng Bahadur, who had initiated to support the Kashmiri Pandits from or protection from the religious persecutions. And he also, because Aurangzeb has ordered people to convert into Islam, and he had them tortured for this reason. And Guru Teng Bahadur with his supporters has tried to help the Kashmiri Pandits, due to which he was tortured and beheaded in the Chandni Chowk, which is in New Delhi. So due to this, his son Guru Gobind Singh, who was the 10th and the last Sikh Guru, had started or established the Khalsa. Khalsa is a martial brotherhood which is committed to justice, equality and the defense of the faith, which frequently clashed with the Mughal forces at the great cost of their life. So, at the cost of their life, even though they had to give up their lives, they used to fight against the invasions. So, until here, we have completed in the previous part, and we have seen the major chief dynasties, that is the Delhi Sultanate or the Mughal Empire, the Ahoms, Eastern Ganga Kingdom, Gajapati Kingdom, Hoysalas or the Vijayanagar empires, and the Bahmani Sultanate, the Rajputs, and Sikhs. So, in this part, we'll be starting with administering India. So, now we'll be starting with the topic administering India. So, administering India in the sense how the different invasions or the people tried to rule or command over India. So, first, starting with administration under the Delhi Sultanate. So, the Delhi Sultanate introduced a political system centered on the Sultan, who possessed the absolute authority as the political military head and whose duties, according to the contemporary chronicles, included defending the territories of Islam against possible aggression, collecting fees and taxes, and keeping in touch with the public affairs and the condition of the people by personal contact. So, first, the political head or the authority that is in the administration of the Delhi Sultanate is the first person is the Sultan, that is referred, or we can think it to be as the king or the head of the state. So he is the absolute authority of, or he is the head of the both political plus military head. And what are his responsibilities? So he have to defend the territory, that is we have to resist the invasions and collecting fees or taxes from the people and knowing the or being aware of the public affairs or problems or what is happening among the common people. So these are the roles of the Sultan. And the Sultan was however assisted by Council of Ministers. So he will be assisted by Council of Ministers. Obviously, if we wanted to take this, or we have to relate this to what is happening at present, we can say that he to be the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. So, and now also we have the same thing, the same rules, but then the names were different. Like this is the Sultan and we have the Council of Ministers, and these are the responsibilities of the Sultan. And one instrument of the administration was the Ekta system, in which the territories were assigned to the nobles, who are called Iqtadars, to collect the taxes, which minus the expenses were supposed to go to the Sultan's treasury. So what they're trying to say is that then they used to follow a system called the Ekta system, where the whole of the kingdom will be divided into certain constituencies. If we say about the modern time, so then they used to say certain territories. So they were divided, and each of these will be assigned to the nobles, who are called the Iqtadars. So the Ekta system, so the people looking after each territory is called the Iqtadar, and they are responsible for collecting the taxes. Because see, the king cannot come and collect the taxes. He'll be having a lot of things. So there's a distribution of the responsibilities among different levels. So this is the level where they'll be able to collect the taxes. And how is it done? So whatever the tax or the whole sum which is collected by the Iqtadars will be minus of their expenses. So basically, each and every territory will have its own expenses about how to build roads or any other things, and how to maintain the city neatly, and all these things would be expense. So whatever the taxes are collected, they'll be minus of the expenses, and whatever is left will be sent to the Sultan's treasury. So obviously even now also, without collecting the taxes, then it will be difficult for us to run the government. So collecting the taxes is fine, but how we are collecting is very important. Is it a burden to the people, or is it fair enough to collect, and what are we giving in return to the people with the taxes we are collecting? So that is what which matters. So here how they are doing is the iqtidars will collect the tax, and whatever the expenses they'll be using up, and whatever is left will be sent back to the Sultan. And they were needed in particular to maintain the army. So how the Sultan is using these is to maintain the army. So maintenance of army is important to resist the invasions for him, and also to expand his kingdom. So in this way they'll be using the money. So this system created a network of local administration loyal to the central authority. We can see that iqtidars belong to the local administration, and they need to be loyal to the central authority. If they are not loyal, then the leftover money will not easily transfer to the Sultan. So they have to be loyal, but their posts were not hereditary. So it is important to remember that iqtidar's post is not hereditary. If a father is doing iqtidar post, it will not mean that automatically his son will become the next iqtidar. That is what it means. It is not hereditary. So while the taxes were levied on trade at every stage, the burden fell mostly on the peasantry, and some contemporary accounts report considerable cruelty in extracting revenue from the land. So here we can see that under this Delhi Sultanate, the collection was not fair. It was a burden on the people. So such collection will not last long. So at present, if we see, they'll collect the GST or the income tax or all this, it is done keeping in mind of the common people. It is becoming a burden or not. But at that time, they were not looking into all these things. Their only motto is to collect the money and fund for the army or the maintenance of army and for the luxuries, and all these are only seen. But it is not seen in the point of view of the people, which is the peasantry. So it has become almost a burden heavily on the common people. Next, we look into the Mughal administrative framework. So until now we have seen the framework of the Delhi Sultanate. So now we are moving on to the Mughals. How did they do the administration? So aiming at a greater control and efficiency, Akbar recognized his administrative machinery. The Diwan took care of the finances, while the Mir Bakshi looked after the army matters, and Khan-e-Sahib was in charge of the public work, trade, industry, agriculture besides the royal household. So we can see that there is a proper distribution of the powers. So we can see that first starting with the Diwan, who took over the finance. So all the financial matters will be spoke with the Diwan. And next is the Mir Bakshi, who is asked to look over the military matters. And the Khan-e-Saman will be in charge of the public works, trade, industries, and the agriculture besides the royal household. And the Sadr is responsible for justice, religious, and educational matters. So such ministers were assigned to each of the empire's 12 provinces, which are the Subah, which were further subdivided with effective checks and balances enforced between the government officials. So it is important to remember that all these are the ministries, and they are assigned to each and every province. So there are 12 provinces under his rule, which are called the Subhas, and each is assigned with each one of them, so that there will be effective checks and balances between the government officials. At the village levels as well, the traditional structures of self-governance continued more or less. So we can see that this is how the Akbar had divided the control to gain proper control over the local administration. So when a certain person is responsible for something, then it will be more accountable. So whenever whoever wants about the financial things, they'll go to Diwan. About the military, then we have to go to a particular person. So like this, if we divide the works, it will be more easy for them to administer as well as for the king to look over what is happening. And Akbar also instituted the Manasabdari system. So Akbar has also instituted the Manasabdari system. And as Abdul Fazil recorded in his Ain-i-Akbari, which describes that Akbar's administration, Mansabdars are the officers. So Mansabdari systems is where Mansabdars will be there, who are the officers. According to their Mansab rank, was expected to maintain a precise number of elephants, horses and camels as well as troops for the states. And this made it possible to assemble an army at a short notice without having to maintain a permanent centralized army. So in the Akbar's rule, they were not having a permanent central army. They had the Mansabdari system where it had the Mansabdars who were the officers, and each Mansabdar is expected to maintain a precise number of elephants. So each of the Mansabdar, according to the rank, will be given a certain number or expected to have a certain number of elephants, horses and camels and troops for the state. So whenever they require, they will be called upon. So it is not that the whole of the army will be at the one place or the king have to look over all of the things. So everything will be under the officers, that the Mansabdars, who will be taking care of a small amount of the army. So whenever they wanted, they'll join all of these at one place for the period of time. So regular inspections were carried out to ensure the accompliance. And Mansabdars were generally paid by being assigned land and therefore are also known the Jagirdars. So the Mansabdars may also be called the Jagirdars because for their work they will be assigned land. So assigned land, that is the Jagirs. Assigned land is called Jagirs, and so they are called Jagirdars because this assigned land is given to them. So for the duty of which they look after the elephants or keep the elephants, horses and troops, they will be given land in return. So despite Akbar's growing tolerance for different faiths, non-Muslims were kept in a minority in higher echelons of the administration. For instance, the total percentage of non-Muslim officials in his administration rarely exceeded 1/3 of the total and was often much less. So even among Muslim officials, those of foreign origin were generally favored over that of Indian origin. So even though we have seen that Akbar has encouraged or has tolerance for all the faiths, but the non-Muslims were always a minority in the administration. So having 1/3 of the other faiths is also very difficult to see in the administration. And we can see that the foreign origin people are given more priority than the Indian origin Muslims. So if we see in the Muslims as well, the foreign officials, foreign origin people are giving more importance than the Indian origin Muslim officials. And then Tudar Mal, who is Akbar's finance minister, introduced an efficient revenue system. He made detailed survey for crop yields and prices and determined prices for each crop on the basis of that information. He also initiated systemic survey of the land in the entire empire, which boosted revenue collection and strengthened the state apparatus. So it is important to remember that Thodar Mal, who was Akbar's finance minister, has introduced a new revenue system, which is an efficient revenue system where they will be taking surveys of the crop yields. So there will be crop lands in the kingdom. So we'll be taking detailed surveys of these and also the prices which will be paid for these lands after they are sold or harvested. So he also initiated systemic survey on the land in the entire kingdom. So they have seen the land on the entire kingdom and how each piece of land is utilized and what is actually the cost of the land. And by this they started to levy or charge or collect the revenue. So the collection of the taxes was in a more systemic manner by actually knowing what is the price of each piece of land. So in this way, the state's revenue has boosted and strengthened the state apparatus. So we will see in a different kind of administration, that of the Marathas, in the next chapter. So in detail, we'll be studying about Marathas in the next chapter. So until now, we have studied the administration of the the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughals, especially of the Akbar. So now we'll move on to the people's life. So even shifting political powers between the 13th and 17th century, India witnessed vibrant economic activity. Thanks to the agrarian foundations and the thriving artisanal industries, community-based and temple-based economies, and extensive trade networks. So even though we had unstable governances from 13th to 17th century, there were always a change in power, invasions, new kings coming, new policies, and all these things. But our economic activity was vibrant. That is, it did not fall down or collapse at one go, because we had a diversity in our economic activities ranging from agriculture to the temple-based economies, community-based industries, weaving, and all these things were there. There were different aspects. So our economic activity did not collapse. So building on the decentralized economic and social systems such as the Shrenis, guilds, jatis, that is professionally defined communities, and systems for credit, the subcontinent remained one of the wealthiest regions in the world. So we had the jatis, we followed the jatis where that particular group of community of people will follow that particular occupation. So in this way we are able to hold all the occupations in our communities, and so even after the instabilities from 13th to the 17th century, we were one of the wealthiest regions in the world. And the Sultanate period saw some progress in the infrastructural works, especially roads in North India, bridges and few canals and other of the irrigation works, and from creation of new cities, all of which expanded considerably during the Mughal Empire. So we have seen that in the Sultanate period there was a start in the industrial progresses, but it was also continued during the Mughal period as well. And the coins in several metals and denominations were introduced as currency, and the Mughals will use a different system with a rupaya of silver and a dam of copper. So there was the introduction of a new currency and denominations as well. And agriculture was the mainstay of Indian economy. So even to today, according to the surveys, we can say that 70% of our population is directly or indirectly involved in agriculture. So in the same way, at that particular period also, our main source of Indian economy is agriculture. And we've already seen that rulers relied on the agrarian revenue to maintain their administration and military, and typically extracting land revenue at 1/5 of the produce, though some of the sultans raised it high of 1/2. So most of the kingdom survived or collected taxes mostly on the agrarian revenue, that is the revenue from agriculture itself. So they were started to extract the land revenue, that is 1/5 of the total produce, and some kings even went to an extent to take the total of half of the revenue, even though it was a burden on the farmers, but they have taken it to maintain the army or for the expansion of the kingdom and several other reasons. So typically they used to take 1/5 of the revenue or the land revenue. So the expansion of the irrigation systems increased agricultural productivity, allowing for the production of multiple crops, including both the food, that is rice, wheat, barley, pulses, sugarcane, spices, and the non-food items like cotton, which found a thriving textile production. Because we've seen that in India we have some of the best quality cotton which is growing. So our lands are so efficient that all the best quality things can be grown on them. So this is one of the advantage of India. So let us note that agricultural output varied from region to region and period to period. So the peasantry suffered several severe famines in this period, with relief depending upon the particular rulers' benevolence. So it is not that always the farmers or the agriculture was thriving. They have also seen the periods of drought or famine, and their relief or the recovery is dependent on the particular ruler's benevolence. We have to remember what is benevolence. Benevolence is the desire to do good to others. So it depends on the ruler, the king, in which extent he will try to help the people or help them to recover at the quickest rates. And apart from the textile, craftspeople made a wide range of products from weapons to utensils to ornaments and jewelry items. And the shipbuilding essential to river and our overseas trade developed considerably in those centuries. So even the ship trade has developed during those centuries. Overseas trade has developed. So if there is shipbuilding and ship trade, it means that the supplies in this country are moving to elsewhere countries through the waters. And the Indian goods were exported through coastal and riverside towns as Calicut, Mangalore, Surat, Masulipattnam or Hooghly. So even these places started to develop, that is the port started to develop, and therefore there was a smooth import and exchange happening. And India imported much less than it exported. So import products included the silk, horses, metals and all kinds of luxury goods were imported. Our import is less than our export. So our export is more, and whatever were imported included the silk, horses, metals and luxury goods were imported. And merchants from Arabia and Persia, now the Iran and Central Asia, have settled in the Indian ports, contributing to the bustling trade activity. They have settled in the Indian ports because such was the trade which was happening in those places. And next is the hundi system also enabled the merchants to transfer funds across political boundaries without physically transporting the currency, making them less vulnerable to plunder. So they followed the hundi system, which enabled the merchants to transfer funds across political boundaries which are physically transporting the currency. So they did not take the currency from one place to another, because taking currency from one place to another, maybe someone will come on the way and plunder all the wealth and leave. So they followed the hundi systems. And the trader communities such as Marwaris have become adept at the operating across different political regimes and developing parallel systems of credit and trust that functioned independently of the official structures. So hundi system, in the sense, if in the Indian port a particular merchant has bought some items and or he has sold some items and he have to get the pay, they won't take the money here. They'll go to their country or elsewhere some other place and they will be collecting the money from there. So on the way they wouldn't carry the currency because of the fear of plunder. So this is the hundi system in simple words. So it is not that simple in working, but it can be said as so. And we have also seen that the trader communities such as the Marwaris became adept at operating across different political regimes. So there was the growth of the Marwaris community who had a function on the political regimes across the different places, and they were also developing parallel systems of credit and trust that functioned independently of official structures. So while the earlier periods such saw prosperity, in the late 1600s witnessed economic stress. So in the starting we were seeing prosperity, but in the 1600s there was economic stress. So the peasants were often left with a smaller share of produce after the taxes and payouts and the payments to intermediary parties, and this caused many to lose their land and become bonded laborers. So once they used to crop on their own land, but due to the taxes and they have to pay to the intermediary parties and all these things, they had lost their land and started to become bonded labor. That is, they started to work for money for someone else. So initially they used to work on their own farm, but after losing their land they started to work as bonded laborers. And historians suggest that craftspeople and laborers too often faced harsh economic conditions, and India was still a kind of abundance, as testified by many Arab and Europe travelers. But the wealth was largely concentrated in the hands of rulers, courtiers, high officials and merchant class. So frequent warfare in addition caused forceful displacement of population. So it was even said by the Arab and Europe travelers who have traveled to India that most of the wealth was centered in or in the hands of ruler, courtiers and higher classes of people. And the poor people had to face economic crisis because either they have to pay huge amounts of taxes, or due to war they have to change from one place to another. When a particular place is under war, then obviously the people or common people have to move from one place to another, and they will lose their livelihood, which was what they have settled for all these years. So in this way, there was an increase in the laborers and the craftspeople who were in the economic stress in India, and the wealth was centered under few people. And at the level of the common people, these were instances of clashes, especially over the sacred sites that had been desecrated or destroyed under the ruler's sanctions. But by and large, people of different faiths and communities lived peacefully side by side and economically dependent on each other. Even though there had been chances of some rivalry based on religion or faiths, but most of the people had maintained to stay peacefully and also were economically dependent on one another. And even as most rulers across India patronized the arts communities too, strove to maintain or revive the traditions, many of which have adapted to the changing circumstances. Among these cultural traditions, a fair degree of interaction resulted in the creation of a shared heritage. So, most of the rulers, we have seen that they were appreciating the art and architecture, giving importance to literature and art, and this has made the creation of a shared heritage among the people. So the people of all faiths have come together in India, and there is a rich heritage which we have inherited from our forefathers by the combination of many faiths. And through it all, India endured economically prosperous on the whole, but often politically unstable. During this period of frequent reshaping of political map, India faced serious challenges but survived. It is a tale not only of hardship but also resilience, and through the sword when the occasion demanded, but also through fresh creation in art, literature, spirituality, and the timeless values. So we can remember that even though India was economically prosperous in all the period, it was often politically unstable. So even though economically it was fine to go, but it was politically unstable, and it shows even though India has faced such hard challenges, not just the hardship of the people but also their resilience, that is their way or the courage they shown and the patience they had in looking forward to the things and creating the best of what they have is what Indians have. And there was also fresh creation in the art, literature, and spirituality and the timeless values. So, this is the summary which we have learned in this whole chapter. So, this period has witnessed many foreign invasions led by the Turkic, Afghan, and the Mughal forces, which caused widespread. So, this period, in the sense, it is the medieval period that is in between the 13th to the 17th century. We have seen many invasions, India has seen. And this period has many instances of religious intolerance. Buddhists, Jains, Hindus, Sikhs, and many others had suffered severe persecutions at times, and though some rulers were more broad-minded than the others. And agriculture and trade expanded, enhancing India's wealth and connectivity with the wider world, and yet the economic conditions of the common subjects generally remained harsh. So even though the economic or agricultural activity was fine in India, but the common people were facing economic stress, and the Indian society showed adaptability and resilience in rebuilding the towns, cities, and temples and other aspects of the economy. And at some time, it found ways to preserve cultural traditions and blend indigenous and foreign elements to create new cultural expressions. And many forms of art and architecture, including the architecture, music, painting, flourished in India. So, it is important to remember that there was a blend in the indigenous in the sense the native and the foreign elements to create the new cultural expressions. This has happened in India due to constant invasions. So this is what we have studied in this whole chapter, and once again go through the NCERT, give a quick reading and answer these questions for